witness and witness coach for over 25 years and has won over $1.5 billion in settlements for the benefits of electric ratepayers in California and Minnesota. He's also negotiated several multi-million-dollar radar contracts for the Air Force. He holds a PhD in economics from the University of Minnesota, has been intimately involved in the creation of energy and tax policy at the state and national levels. He's the author of the upcoming book, Survive and Thrive on the Witness Stand, which is expected to be out in mid-September, I believe. So you'd have to come back and get us the books, we'll arrange that. But today, Mike will be sharing an inside look at the courtroom process before, during, and after, sharing the secrets about being a successful witness, whether in the criminal, civil, divorce, custody, or other proceedings. He will also give us some tips on how to be comfortable and successful on the witness stand. So with that, would you give a warm Sierra Madre welcome to Dr. Michael Alexander.
I love telling people I'm a professional witness because it gives me sort of a mystic status. No one knows what that is. Therefore, it's going to be exciting. Well, at the risk of losing my mystic status, today I'm going to rip apart the veil and tell you what it is I do as a professional witness. I'm also going to share some secrets because I do it professionally, and the people I coach and teach do it professionally. But there are a lot of reasons why the average human being winds up being a witness. Now, Marilyn, you're in law enforcement, so obviously criminal is near and dear to your heart. But there's civil proceedings, real estate proceedings, copyright and patent proceedings, divorce proceedings, custody proceedings. A lot of importance involved in those kinds of things. So all of these things involve people being witnesses on the stand, and all of them require you to understand how to do your best and hopefully how to do limited amounts of stress. So let me start off by giving you my background. I worked for Southern California Edison for 17 years, managing their intervention in natural gas rate cases. I also worked in Minnesota for the commission there, doing witness work, and I've also done work before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Let me tell you how my day or my career activities actually looked. It starts off anytime a public utility, and that's going to be my stalking horse example, anytime a public utility wants to change rates, or who pays those rates, and anytime they want to change how they otherwise market gas. For example, anyone remember the big natural gas explosion in San Bruno a few years ago? Trying to figure out how to make sure that doesn't happen again is a major issue. In order to make sure they were doing it right, they had to file and go through a quasi-legal proceeding, quasi-jurisdictional proceeding. The way it works is, they decide what changes they want to make. They then submit about 300 to 500 pages worth of testimony, covering every possible detail and whatever in the world, and they send it out. Now, I was an intervener. I worked for Southern California Edison Company. We didn't sell gas, but we bought a lot of it to run our generators. So we were affected by the prices. And when I say we, you. I'm sorry, is there anyone here who doesn't buy electricity? Okay, just want to make sure I know my audience. Anytime we had to pay more for gas, you had to pay more for electricity. And my job was to make sure that the rates were low. So I would get these large amounts of documents and I'd start reading through them as soon as I got them. I would have about 3 weeks before we would have a judge decide, well, this is a legitimate issue, this is not a legitimate issue. Now, the judge didn't just decide that. I had to, having read through all this, file testimony with my lawyer, where I would say, well, this is an issue we care about, this is one we don't care about. This is one they didn't mention that's pretty important to us. So I would work with a lawyer and file right then and there comments on what should be considered. And we would define that in advance. The judge would then write a memo which would define what the issues were. So some of the things which were in these 500 pages would go away. Some things would be added. Then comes the really challenging part. Now I gotta tell you, I love being a witness. As I said to many people, I think I'm especially want to do here. When I worked for Edison, there were 4 major perks. In order: my salary, the medical plan, being a witness, the dental plan. I loved being a witness. Not everyone does. And the reason why I love it, partly is because I know the secrets that I'm going to talk to about at the end. I would start to read through this stuff. And I would say, okay, this is interesting. I like this. We can always object. Sometimes we want them to do things. I don't like this. I want to bring this up. And so I would start by asking questions, subpoenaing from the gas company information. Why did you say this? What studies have you done? What data do you have that I can use to do my own studies? Or in some cases, why didn't you do a study? This is a 9-month process between the time they file the original and the time we get a final decision. It's a longer process getting set for it, but about 9 months. It's a long, slow, painful process. It's a lot like giving birth. However, when you give birth, you can't change it afterwards. You have to worry about a change happening later, but we'll worry about that a little bit differently. I would start then to look at what they said. Now, some questions, just the fact they had an answer was enough information. What studies did you do to justify this? And they'd say, we did this study. I'd say, okay, it's been studied, I don't have to worry about it. Or I should say, I can't challenge it, they've done a study. Some cases they say, we haven't done a study. I'd say, gotcha. They can't prove it because they don't know it. I will tell you, people everywhere in life, and not just in the legal profession, there's a lot of things people will claim to know that they don't know. Be aware of that. By the way, you know that there's never been a study done to prove that flossing is good for you? Solid, we know it, the government said it, and they're not allowed to say it unless there's a study. But there actually never was. So, when I got something from the gas company that said they knew this, I'd say, do you really know it? And so I challenge that. I do my own studies. I look at the data, I figure it out and whatever. Because being a professional witness isn't just about sitting on a witness stand. It's about being ready to sit on a witness stand. It's about being able to prove what you want to prove. I have a lot of background in economics. I have a lot of background in storytelling. I have a lot of background in answering questions quickly and on the fly. But fundamentally, I gotta know what I'm talking about before I can work as a witness. And I have to be able to say under oath, this is what I believe. So I would do those studies and I would be ready. Then I would write my testimony. And the testimony I read would be shorter, it would be centralized. But before I could pass that out, by the way, I had to talk to the other people at Southern California Edison and say, the gas company wants to do this. That's outrageous. And my buddy Carl would say, yes, it is, Michael. We do the same thing. Please don't mess it up for us. Or I talked to one of my gas traders and he'd say, I had no idea they did that. No wonder this is going wrong. And then he would actually trade gas differently based on the knowledge of what they were actually doing. So there's more than just what I want to say on the witness stand. There's what I want to not say, and the information I want to pass on so we know things. I'm not the only one reading their testimony and writing my own responses. All of the other companies that bought large amounts of gas would also be reading this testimony and preparing to go on the witness stand. And they might agree with me, they might disagree with me. One of the major generators in the Southern California region is the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Edison is a major generator. and distributor. Los Angeles Department of Water and Power is a major generator and distributor. How often would you guess we were in agreement?
Often.
In 17 years, I can't think of a single issue we agreed on. Now, it's very friendly. Their lawyer and I would get together, we'd have lunch, we'd talk about our kids, we'd talk about schooling, we'd even talk about the case. But we didn't agree on the issues. But we didn't let the animosity get in our way. In fact, I still remember the time when I filed testimony and Norman said to me, "Michael, I was delighted to read your testimony." And I said, "Really? I didn't think you'd agree with it." He said, "Not one word, but it was fun to read." And if you're going to be on the witness stand, as I'll point out later, don't take it personally. Most disagreements are legitimate differences of opinion between men of goodwill. There are reasons, of course, why they're wrong and I'm right, which is an argument that's never worked with my wife, so you'd think I wouldn't work on a witness stand, but they're more liberal there. But I always assume it's a legitimate difference of opinion between men of goodwill. Now, there are villains out there. Doesn't do me a whole lot of good to assume that's what I'm working with, though, so I don't. So I would file my testimony and submit it, and then I'd read all the testimony that someone else had submitted, that other people had submitted, and see, did I agree with LADWP? Did I agree with the major industrial customers? Did I agree with the people who brought in gas, the other gas shippers who also sold gas? And I'd read theirs. And then I would have to very, very quickly, because time is shortens each time down, I would read what they had read, and I would write them questions about why did you say this, what's it mean, what studies have you done, etc. And they would write them to me. Now, I'm a member of a group called Toastmasters. I know April's a member because she and I are in the same club. And I heard that
Dr. White?
Dr. White is as well. So, in table topics, in these impromptu speaking challenges when it gets to the club level, you can make up an answer. And it's a lot of fun. You don't have to be right, just so you say something. However, when you're on the witness stand, anything you say, or anything you say you're going to say, when they ask the original questions, you've got to give the same answer. And it's going to come back to haunt you in future proceedings. One of my buddies actually had something he'd said 25 years ago in another state brought up on the witness stand and said, "But didn't you say this?" Fortunately, he was very smooth. He looked at the lawyer and said, "I'd like to feel I learned something over the last 25 years.
That's right.
But the fact of the matter was, smooth though that was, his credibility was diminished. And so every time I write something, people talk about people in the legal profession and witnesses being simply shills. You know, they'll say whatever. If I did that, I'd be good for 2-3 cases at most. Because after I do that, they'd say, "But in the other case you said," and I'd be gone. So I have to make real sure that I'm consistent. And the great thing about that is, it's an incentive to be honest. I'm not gonna lie. First of all, what Mark Twain said, the greatest thing about honesty is you never have to remember what you said. But the other thing is, I never have to worry about coming back to haunt me. So I write the testimony, and then we get to the witness stand. Now, the witness stand is when people really tend to get nervous. I don't. Now, I'll admit it, I have a theatrical background. My grandfather was a community theater. My parents met in play shop in college. So I was involved in theater since before I was born. I do theater. My son is going back to college to do theater. So it's a little bit more natural for me to be on the stand. But I have to work with these fast-paced changes and everything else. And I have to think things through. And that's where the skills and techniques really become your saving grace. And then eventually, I'll talk about those skills after I finish this discussion part. Eventually, the judge makes and writes a decision. We write up our comments and suggestions on what the judges has said, recommending the decision, recommending he make changes. Then he will submit it to the Public Utilities Commission. Now, the Public Utilities Commissioners, once we're making the final decisions, you know how the ones who make the final decisions on your gas, electric, telephone rates get their jobs? You know what their number one qualification is? They're golf buddies with the governor. These are good, solid business people. I don't want to get carried away. Some of them are probably Rotarians. Not all of them. But they're not technical experts. So they have to understand what I've said, and they have to understand what everyone else has said, and read the decisions, and make good decisions. And then we lobby them, and try to convince them to make changes, based on what was said in the courtroom and whatever. And that's basically how the process works. And then eventually, there's the process of putting in place the decisions they've made. So from the time that it was first filed to the time that it's all done and in place, it's 18 months, about 9 months to get a decision and 9 more months to put it in place. And that's fundamentally how the policy and things work. Everybody with me so far?
Yes.
Okay. Now the next question, and I hope someone's timing this because I'm not, and I don't want to overrun my time. I don't want anyone to take out their happy bucks for having me speak either, by the way. The question is, how do you be a good witness? Well, let me tell you something. I have a PhD in economics. There are a lot of people with PhDs in economics, and they don't have my track record. I have a genius IQ. Well, not on paper, and not if you believe my wife or my son or anybody who talks to me. There are a lot of people who are smarter than I am who are in this business. But I'm a storyteller. And being a storyteller is what really makes the difference. The first thing I realized before I got on the witness stand is it's theater. Ultimately, I'm a believer in the system. I'm not cynical. But the judge, the jury have to make a decision based on what they see and hear. I have to convince them. Now, a lot of people ruin their chances of being successful as a witness because they say what they think they want to hear. This is what's right. No. Think about theater. Think about what's going to convince the judge and jury. What they want to hear, how you look, how you... One of the cases I was on, which we managed to win anyway, one of the allied groups, the state of California actually, this was before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, they put on a witness who was a young, attractive, curly-haired blonde. She dressed a little too brightly, a little too much jewelry, and a little too much makeup. Now, I'm not prejudiced against blondes. I'm not prejudiced against people who are young. Damn them. But she looked like a ditzy blonde. And it cut into her credibility. She did not use her words, her gestures, her activity to break that image. And as a matter of fact, just to make it worse, her lawyer had written some of her testimony, she didn't understand it. And so when the opposing lawyer said, "What did you mean by this?" She said, "Well, I'm not sure. My lawyer told me to put that in." Everything went. I go on the witness stand and I make every effort to look professorial. Now you guys see me around town, and you'll see me in blue jeans and a t-shirt, probably no holes in them because my wife throws that stuff out. I don't look like someone you'd expect to respect on the witness stand. I can tell you my hair's never messed up. But other than that, when I go to the witness stand, I wear a suit, I wear a tie, I worry about how I present myself. And that's important. I also worry about what is the judge going to believe. So, the first time I went up to go on the witness stand, the very first time, The lawyer said, we're gonna scare this man. We're gonna put him through a mock examination, and he's gonna see just how bad it is. And they fired questions at me. Good and hard, and how can you say this, and what do you mean by this, and everything else. For 45 minutes, I had answers to every one of their questions. Good, solid answers. I was there, I was ready, I was prepared. I was strong. And they finished and they said, wow, we've never seen anybody who could fight back as hard as you did, who had every single answer under control and absolutely there. Don't ever do that again. Because you were not going to convince the judge. The judge wants to like you. You weren't likable. You were knowledgeable, you weren't likable. Could the judge follow everything? Maybe, maybe not. You wrote good testimony, but it's hard to follow when you're fighting like that. And equally importantly, you got to work with the lawyers. We didn't always understand what you said, so there was a problem. We couldn't help out. Working on the stand is a team effort, and that's why you have to work with your lawyers in advance. As a witness coach, when I train people to be witnesses, that's actually one of the reasons why they need a witness coach and not just a good lawyer. Because have you ever seen a play where the star is directing the play? And you'll notice that the only guy who's really believable and really centered is the star. The other people aren't. Well, on the witness stand, the lawyers think of themselves as the star. Theater, they're directing it. They want it so that they look good. They talk about what they know. Well, if the witness doesn't say something, it doesn't go in. And if the witness is incredible, the judge isn't going to believe it. So you need someone to make sure that you as a witness know how to tell your story. And I go on the witness stand and I practice my story. I know what I want to say. I know what I want to get across. You ever watch a politician at a press conference? Mr. Johnson, what do you think about this? He said, excellent question. And then he talks about that. As a witness, I do the same thing. I know what the question is, and I answer it enough that I'm not evasive, but I come back to my talking points, the things that I want to get done. And I practice it so those are natural enough to me that it flows. And when I tell the story, if you give people facts in isolation, it's like dropping water into the ocean. They're isolated, they don't fit together. Drop a gallon of water into the ocean. Drop 39 million gallons of water into the ocean. It'll get lost, no one will notice it, right? Make a story out of it. Freeze those 39 million gallons of water, and you have the iceberg that sank the Titanic. That has an impact. So make your stories, make your facts fit together. Know what you want to say. And when you practice it enough, you're comfortable on the stand, because I know this. I know where I'm going. The other thing that really scares people in any Q&A session, particularly on the witness stand, is the question, what about the weaknesses? What are they going to do about it? What if they challenge me on this? I spend a large amount of time practicing what happens when they challenge me on things. When I go on the witness stand, I spend as much time figuring out what's wrong with my story as I do figuring out what's right with my story. Number one mistake amateur witnesses make, particularly juvenile or criminal cases, people they'll just get insistent on their side of the story. I'm ready for the weaknesses. They say, are you sure you could see that? I said, well, there were streetlights. Well, I look at this study and this study and this study, and they all conclude together. Not perfect, but it fits together. So I'm ready for my weaknesses. I'm ready for the challenges. Absolutely. When I trained students for the mock trial. The Constitutional Rights Foundation does a mock trial challenge every year. And I've trained students for that, and we've gone to the quarter and semifinals 4 years in a row. I teach them the stories, and I teach them to be prepared to be challenged, so they know where to go. We cross them, we work very hard on that, and they're successful. The same techniques that I used for utility work, I see it's 8:20, I say o'clock. What time do I have to be done?
8:30.
8:30?
You
Okay.
might have to leave a few times,
Pardon?
for questions and answers, so maybe 5 minutes more to ask a few questions.
Very good, okay, I'll do that. The same techniques work for them. The same techniques that I use for utility generation work for arson cases, murder cases, terrorism, theft, even art forgery. I loved art forgery, it was a lot of fun to study. Doesn't take that long. Doesn't take that long we pressed the judges with what my 6th grade students knew. Because I read the article on Wikipedia. And I figured out what it meant. It didn't take genius, it didn't take a PhD. It took reading it, understanding it, and thinking it through, and applying it. Also will remind you, my grandfather was a civil rights lawyer in Selma, Alabama. Not a popular job. We were talking earlier about civil rights, and I didn't tell that story then because I wanted to save it for now. My grandfather said, the law guarantees a man a fair trial. Nothing can guarantee him a fair decision. If you want to be comfortable on the witness stand, you have to accept this. And you have to accept the law as the law, and that the people you're dealing with have their own prejudices, their own biases, their own things they're trying to do. And you have to accept that. You have to be aware of that. You also want to be aware of it with respect to the theater. If my judge has a tendency to particularly care about residential customers, small customers, then I don't talk about being fair to the industrial sector, I don't talk about being fair to shippers, I don't talk about being fair to stockholders. I say, he cares about the residential customers, I'm gonna tell the story about residential customers because that's what he wants to hear. When people do jury selection, number one secret of jury selection, you want an audience which is homogeneous and not used to thinking for themselves. The number one preferred jury, unless you're trying to get severe penalties, is frankly middle-aged white housewives. Housewives because they're used to watching television, not doing hardcore analysis themselves. Middle-aged and white because you pretty much know how they're gonna think and they're all gonna think the same way. And if you're running a trial, you want to know your audience, and the more you know your audience, the better you can do. So, just quickly here, the secret of being a successful and comfortable witness: practice, write a story, know how to deal with your own weaknesses in advance. Remember that it's theater, and remember that your job is to convince the judge and the jury, not yourself. With that, if anyone's interested, I have more literature back there on the table. I'd love to hear your comments and provide you with things, and I will turn.
Question.
Question.
When you said you practiced, how much did you practice?
A lot. Short answer is, we have about 2 weeks between the final filing of testimony and going up on the stand. And I pretty much, although I read their stuff in that time period, pretty much spend all 2 weeks just practicing, rehearsing, writing my arguments and whatever. Sometimes it's with the lawyer that I'm working with, sometimes it's myself. Like anybody who really knows the real world, when I'm walking my dog and taking showers too. That's when the best work gets done, right? Did anybody say their best work is done in Blue Office? I've never heard anyone say that yet.
Creative ideas, that's on there.
Yes.
So when you're subpoenaed to come in as a witness, do you have the right to find out what's going on at the trial and to get all that information you're talking about and the questions that you're gonna be asked, because none of that, I mean, I've been subpoenaed and I'm put on the stand and I'm not prepared, cause I don't even know what they're gonna ask or what the suit's about.
Well, part of that is a trick, to be honest with you.
Yes, I know that.
And you subpoena, first of all, you never wanna tip your hand. You wanna have enough information. Trials are not won by surprise, regardless of what you see on television. At the same time, you don't wanna give them extra prep time. So you can't ask for all the questions they're gonna ask. They don't have to know that before they're on the stand. And they can make their own changes.
So I'm the witness.
You're the witness.
I'm subpoenaed in, and I don't even know what the trial's about.
Your lawyer,
I don't have a lawyer, I'm
Okay.
a witness, I've
Okay,
been
well-
subpoenaed to come and speak.
then
And
in proper
witness.
prose, to use the Latin phrase, one of the three I know. The others are on money, so that limits it. You have the right to ask the nature of the questions or whatever. You have the right to see the sort of the scoping, if there is a scoping memo or whatever thing, and to see what's pre-filed
Oh, from the court?
from the court. But depending upon the case, there may be limitations, but you certainly, I would read the original filing which opened the case.
Oh,
If they've opened the case, they have to file something with the judge saying, this is the reason why this case should go to court.
okay.
Read that,
All right.
and that will help you know what issues they've brought up.
I didn't know that anything was available for that, so.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So when you're advising a witness, do you get involved before the depo and before the trial?
I recommend, and of course there's a matter of your finances and everything else. I recommend that they get their crew, their team together as early as possible. That includes the lawyer, that includes a good witness coach, that includes all the aides and everything else that they're gonna work with for the staff. Be prepared. I mean, the preparation is key. If you do things at the last minute, it looks like it, and that undercuts your credibility. Anything else? I thank you very much for your time, folks.
Right here next to the Rotary Dinner.
We had a camera for us to.
Okay, I have the second shot, then we get one. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for coming. Well, success is when preparation meets opportunity, which I think we've learned today from Michael. To go into a situation where you're under